got a couple of exciting topics to talk about today. We couldn't wait to record this podcast. Lots going on in the news lately. But today we're going to cover two topics. One is the introduction from Meta of Llama 4. And we're also going to talk about the Naval Ravikant podcast on Chris Williamson's YouTube channel that came out last week and has been making a lot of noise on X. Tim, I'm going to pass it to you to get us going on Meta and their latest announcement.
It's pretty interesting because what was it? Maybe 2 episodes ago, John was saying, "Don't count Meta out." They've got their conference coming up, and we'll see kind of what they surprise us with as far as Llama goes. And again, I don't really use Llama much. To me, it's always kind of just been one of those things that who cares what they're doing? But it is pretty interesting. Llama 4 is pretty crazy. Some of the things they've done. They've got 3 models coming out, and they've got pretty huge context windows, and they're built in a way that you can kind of run them locally. And maybe Johnny, you can give us a little more insight into that. But as far as I understand, it does take quite the GPU to make it work, um, but yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think it's a 10 million context window, which is
That's right.
pretty insane because we thought that Google's Gemini was pretty intense with the 1 million coming out, and then 2 million was going to be released here soon. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it, Johnny? You I think have a little more experience with it than either of us do.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, one of the most incredible releases I've seen yet, but in practice, it looks like it may be a little underwhelming so far. I mean, we're 2 days in on the release, and to start, you can run it locally if you have a GPU to support it. So it's not going to be feasible for most people, but still, the fact that they can get it on one GPU is still pretty impressive.
And Scout's the smallest model, right? They got Scout. I can't remember what the second one
Scout
is,
and
and then they got
Maverick.
Behemoth, Maverick. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, Scout is a small one, 17 billion param. Mavericks, their bigger one, and Behemoth is still in training and will be released in a couple months. Immediately when it came out, I tried it with a brand new code project. 'Cause the one thing I'm used to doing more than anything is kicking off a brand new project, putting it in agent mode and seeing how it does on a fairly robust project brief. And for Llama, for whatever reason, this could be a issue with the integration with Klein, but I got a looped response that was printing out parentheses over and over. And eventually I had to stop it because it was infinite parentheses return. So again, I wasn't able to test it for a code project with Klein. I did then go and play with it on AI.meta, and the results were, for me, a little underwhelming as well. And so again, I think this could be a case of what a lot of models are doing now, which is benchmark maxing, where they're kind of overfitting for the benchmarks, and they can come out and say, we scored this on the test, and everyone goes crazy. And when you go to use it, you realize like it doesn't work that well when it's trying to solve a practical problem. People I follow on X are also underwhelmed by the Llama 4 models so far, and it doesn't seem to produce nearly the results that we all hope for, and based on what we read. A couple of things that had me most excited: that size of the context window, especially if it's a context window that's able to maintain good memory. And again, the tests are showing that it actually performs pretty poorly when it comes to using that context window. The other thing is its ability to reason about what's in the image side by side with the text. So instead of it just kind of treating those as separate things, the text and the image, it kind of treats them all as one thing. And the idea is that it should be able to read what's in the image much more accurately than the previous models. I haven't been able to test that either, but hopefully at least that piece can perform, because the other pieces as it relates to coding have not worked well. And so I think, unfortunately, Meta is going to take a bit of flack for this one. Maybe they pushed too early, or maybe they were only focused on the evals, on the benchmarks, and didn't have enough beta testers to go and see if this was actually a solid model for people's everyday practical usage.
How do those benchmark models work as far as the LLM arenas and all that stuff? Because it seems like a lot of times things will come out on that and everyone seems to be super hyped, and But then in practice, once you actually get access to the model and start using it, just doesn't perform as well, because there's always those posts out there like this is a Claude killer or whatever, but then at the end of the day, Claude still, is the choice to go to because it's just so much better in real life applications. Kind of how does that work?
There's really, I think, two that at least, I kind of put them into. One is that they're just evals, right? They're a set of tests and they test them against those tests. Like, how well do you do in this scenario? And so in those cases, it is possible for the models to overfit or to like train against those tests. Um, and the other one is more human, where humans are actually using the model and saying, hey, based on my sort of human evaluation, this is what I think is performing well.
Looks like they run tests in multiple categories. So image reasoning, image understanding, coding, reasoning, and knowledge. So there's most of them have either one or two different tests within that category that they run.
But the ability to do evals on math and coding are kind of the truest forms of evals because for math especially, it's either true or it's not. Now again, you could overfit and then just learn the answers and respond to the answers, so there's always a risk of that. But if you show the steps to complete it, that helps. But you always have to make sure you're introducing new problem sets that the LLM hasn't seen to make sure that it's not just memorized something that it's seen out in the internet.
Right.
With code, similar, like a thing either works or it doesn't. Now, there's still human that may need to go in there and see what the code is actually doing. So there's two components. One, was it able to accomplish the task? And two, is the code coherent? Is it well organized and well structured? That again introduces a bit of a bias because there's no one true way to code anything. So even in those cases, I think there's a it's hard to have perfect evals.
Yeah, another thing I was seeing on there was all over X was Night Whisper, which isn't like formally released. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows who's behind it, what it is exactly. It's a lot of people are speculating that it's uh, has to do with Google and Gemini 2.5 Pro. But yeah, that was another thing that everyone was like, this is going to be a Claude killer and whatever. And a lot of people were in the LLM arena, I guess, testing it and giving it some different commands. The big one for some reason was like a Pokemon generating a Pokemon game or whatever, and it seems to do a pretty good job
Simulation.
of that. But yeah, I'm interested to kind of see number one who is behind that and how it actually ends up performing because I've actually been using Gemini 2.5 quite a bit recently, even though I had kind of bad bad success with it originally, and I seem to be having a lot more success now. That project that I've been working on, I've pretty much done it all in Gemini 2.5, just to number one, kind of see how it does, but also two, to keep my costs down because obviously it's free right now, so that's helpful. But um, yeah, I'm interested to kind of see what that is and if it will live up to the hype that it always gets, or it seems like LLMs always get when they're first coming out. Everyone freaks out and
Initially,
says, yeah, it's a Claude killer or this killer or whatever. Obviously, that's catchy and catches people's attention, but interested to see how that goes.
I see on Reddit, there's a couple days ago, there was a post on Reddit about it, and there's a ton of comments around it. So yeah, that's the suspicion that it's Google. Could be a planted story though.
I'm skeptical that it's Google. Personally, I think what incentive does Google have to open this? I mean, they've released so much already with the recent Gemini model, so I could be proven wrong. I've been wrong more times than I can count, but I would bet that it's not Google. The cost aside, if you remove cost from this and said, "Hey, all models are free," to me, Claude 3.7 is still my number one go-to for anything coding related. Now, if it's not coding, if it's something else, for example, if it's just a question I want to ask, then I'm probably still ChatGPT 4.0 in most cases. If it's thinking, I'm between Grok and OpenAI.
Yeah, OpenAI is supposed to be dropping the full O3 and the O4 mini this month as well. Have you guys heard that news?
I saw the Sam Altman post about their change of plans, how they were looking to move some things forward and some things back based on some of the success they've had.
Yeah, I think 5 was supposed to come out first, and they ended up moving that back and pushing up these two. So should be interesting. I mean, it's kind of hard to speculate. We don't really what's going on. All of this is really speculation, but should be interesting this month to kind of see what all ends up dropping.
One thing about the context window that I think is important to talk about is really two things. One is today, when you need to get maybe private data or more recent data into your LLM, again, assume you build an application and you have some data that you need to get to answer that query. Today, there's a technique called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, that lets you grab that data and then have the LLM enhance its knowledge with that. And RAG techniques have been around. You have a vector database to put all that additional information into. It's gotten a lot easier, but it's still takes a little bit of effort. With these size context windows, you can start to see a world where maybe you don't need RAG in most cases because you could just fit that into the context window, assuming cost is low, right? Because if you have to squeeze that much more information into context, then you're going to pay more for the token usage. And if you use RAG, you're not doing that because you're just pulling back and searching for the specific information. But yeah, you can see a world where more people out of ease just start squeezing more into context in order to solve that problem in a much simpler way, especially if the cost is reasonable. Especially, for example, if you have this, you can run on one GPU, you can imagine some people will just say, hey, I can buy one GPU to host my LLM provider, then I'll throw the context, in which case I don't care about the token cost because, I'm not paying for LLM usage on, because it's open source. I'm just paying for the GPU. So yeah, it opens up a lot of interesting scenarios of having a longer context window, but the context window has to be able to perform well. And on paper, the Llama is very exciting, but in practice, it looks like it might not be there yet. Oh, and then I was going to say, just so people understand, because 1 million context felt like enormous, right? And so someone posted a tweet on just some examples of how much context, how much tokens would be in a specific thing, and he said the entire Harry Potter series would have 1.1 million tokens.
I saw that. Yeah.
Bible, Old and New
Yeah, it's
Testament would have
awesome.
800,000 tokens, and then the entire Game of Thrones book series would have 1.7 million tokens. So
Yeah. And combined, wasn't the point of like in combination, like there's still room.
under 10 million.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, that's wild. I was going to say really quick, I noticed Meta announced they're hosting a AI event at the end of the month. Curious, do you guys know if it'll just be more on Llama 4 or if maybe they're planning to introduce some new things?
That is their conference that they hold. Called, I think, the Llama Conference. Yeah, I think a lot of it is bringing a lot of partners on stage and knowing how they are using it and just bringing hype around Llama itself. Now, I'm sure they'll introduce some more tools and enhancements, but I think right now you can't wait. If the model's ready, you have to push it out because it's moving so fast. So if they waited till 28th, they wouldn't have gotten the buzz that they would have got if they pushed today, because somebody else will release a model this week and then someone else will release a model next week that will take away on some of the longer context window, all these techniques. Someone else will be first, and they want to be first at that game. Now with Llama, like, I think Llama has a problem to overcome here, because to use Llama today as a user, you have to use it in WhatsApp or in Facebook or in Instagram or in AI.meta, which for a regular user would feel like, what is this thing? They don't really have a consumer release that's detached from the social network. And I think for a lot of people, that's a deal killer, right? You'll go into Meta and create a picture that you can post, but you're going to go in there and say, hey, I have this symptom and I'm trying to figure out if I have a health issue, right? You're going to go to ChatGPT because for you, it feels disconnected and feels private. You're not going to post that into the WhatsApp window because now you're like, I'm giving Meta all this personal information that they know about me.
Yes.
And
that's
whatever
linked
Meta
to an
says,
account, right? To a profile.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I think they need to think about that in terms of gaining adoption. And maybe they don't care, but if they ever want to be someone that comes to mind when you as a consumer saying, hey, where do I use AI? I think they have to separate that out of the apps.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a privacy thing, right? Which by the way, side comment, I heard twice this weekend, just ChatGPT it twice from two different people. And I was like, whoa, interesting.
I'm
It's
gonna,
taken a while.
yeah.
You think back to when, we started using ChatGPT on a daily basis. I mean, it's been well over a year. I think we're going on a year and a half around fall of 2023, I think is when that became a normal every day. I go there 3, 4, 5 times a day, and then it's only increased since then. The average person is still barely
For
starting
sure.
to, so the AI is
Implement
increasing
it.
at an
Yeah.
exponential rate, but the people's adoption of it is actually really slow.
But there's a lot to be said still, though, in that they're using the term chat GPT as, as like we used to when Google, was around. Just Google it, and it's crazy the use cases. So here's one use case that I thought was interesting when they were telling me about just chat GPT. They used chat again, voice mode. John, we talked about it on the last episode. Their car wasn't starting. So used voice mode to record the ignition, and ChatGPT was able to give it direction as to like what could be wrong with the car. Mind blowing.
That is. Also, let's let's not gloss over the fact that Ronnie said when Google was around, like they're not around anymore.
Did I say when they
Yeah.
launched or when they, yeah. Who uses Google? I don't use Google anymore.
You always had that first mover advantage, and ChatGPT is the one that came out first, the one that people
Yes.
recognize the most, at least tied to AI. But I think there's actually an opportunity for someone to become the word you use, because ChatGPT is four,
Yeah. It's a mouthful
syllables, right?
too.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
not easy to say. Google's easy to say. It's two. So I think ChatGPT won't be the word in the long term. It is right now, but I think there's an
Mhm.
opportunity for someone to steal that still.
Yeah.
Well, sweet.
Yeah,
I think
for
that
sure.
kind of wraps up everything going on in AI.
Llama.
Yeah. You want to, Ron, kick us
For
off with?
today, Tim.
Well, yeah, exactly. It moves so fast.
Yeah, for today, so much happening. Yeah, let's shift gears a little bit. I don't know if I think you guys watched the episode. So last week, Naval Ravikant, after a multiple year hiatus on podcast, was on with Chris Williamson. Not sure. Did you guys catch that podcast? And if you didn't watch the whole thing, totally reasonable. It's like 3.5 hours long.
I think I'm stuck at about 90%. I've got most of it.
Okay, yeah, yeah. It took me a few days to get through it. Obviously, I listened to it in a few chunks, and then over the last couple of days, re-listened to about half of it. But yeah, just mind blowing. Number one, for him to get on a podcast. Number two, to get on Chris Williamson's podcast, who has been on fire lately. His story, we can have a whole nother topic on him and his rise, but super impressive guy. And in fact, it was interesting to learn that Naval, who is extremely popular. And for those of you who don't know, John, you can probably enlighten us. You have more background on him, but he's a founder of AngelList, co-founder of AngelList, and early investor in Uber, Twitter, and many others. But he's took a hiatus from podcast, and he actually reached out to Chris Williamson to get on his podcast, which I thought was unbelievable. Says a lot about Chris and what he's doing. But anyway, incredibly insightful podcast. I took some notes, but would love to get John and Tim your thoughts on it. What some things that kind of resonated with you when you heard it.
Before I get into Naval, I'll just say that 2 wins for Chris Williamson in 1 week. I mean, he had Naval on, and then he was on the All In podcast. So, yeah, talk about, rise. He's already pretty big, but those are two pretty big highlights for him in 1 week.
Yeah, in fact, he said that on the podcast, he said, that Naval was on his Mount Rushmore prior to interviewing him. He had always been on the Mount Rushmore of people he wanted to interview. So having that interview was a dream come true for him. And again, imagine being in his shoes. He's on your Mount Rushmore and the guest actually reaches out to you to get on your podcast versus you reaching out to them. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I honestly, I think I've heard parts of his Joe Rogan episode, but that's kind of really the only exposure I've had. But it was really good. I think, his the way he looks at the world and the way he kind of views things and how he should live his life and how other people should live their life and stuff like that. I think it's cool. I think that it does. He mentioned this a lot. I think it does come from a place of success, and not everyone could just live their life the way that he kind of lives his. Um, but yeah, I mean, his insights are really, really good. I loved, his kind of thoughts on Elon and his willingness to kind of just always be willing to start over and take that huge gamble. He sold PayPal, and then invested almost everything into SpaceX, Tesla, and Solar City. And he's like, I thought it was pretty funny that he was like, now he's doing that again with kind of the federal government. Not really worried about looking like a fool if it doesn't work out, just willing to take those risks. And yeah, so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really insightful. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I mean, for me, there's a lot obviously that resonated. There was a lot of different topics he went into. I think one of the ones that I always think about is that relationship between success and happiness. This idea that, you have to be successful, you have to make a certain amount of money and attain material things in order to be happy. And then when you get there and you realize that it doesn't actually bring happiness, but you have to kind of get there to realize that the things that are important are actually much simpler. It's such a hard thing to do, right? Because everything around us is all about the happy people are the ones that have the material things, that have the fame, and so that's what you seek, not realizing that they aren't happy themselves either. And really, happiness comes from family and friends and being content with just having today, right? The gift
Yeah.
of what is today, and so that resonates quite a bit. And then other things, were interesting. This idea of being unapologetic about being selfish with your time. I think I'm sometimes there. I get invited to things, and I rarely go because I just don't feel like they're worthwhile. I don't feel like I'll get much out of it, and I feel like I can do more with that time, or I could be happier doing other things. And that is very selfish, frankly. I'm probably not as unapologetic about it as he is, where he'll just kind of say it. We're all maybe make an excuse and be like, "Oh, I can't. I got other things going on." So that was really interesting. But yeah, I mean, we're all wired differently, and we all get happiness from different things. And for me, I've learned to enjoy the journey of building a startup, whereas other people will suffer in the process of building a startup. I've gone through that process once already where I suffered greatly in the process. And now the second time around, I'm just enjoying the journey, even though by all objective measures, I should be suffering even more so than the first time around.
It's good stuff, John. It's funny on the kind of being selfish. I made note of that as well. And what was kind of funny to me was when he talked about his wife, and he doesn't allow his wife to put anything on his calendar. So when you talk about like being unapologetic and just he's extreme with it, he's like, my wife cannot book anything, even a family event like a wedding, birthdays, like, and she'll tell people you have to ask him. So it all goes through him to confirm, which I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm like that too, but not to the extreme. That's yeah, it's pretty extreme, but a lot to be
Yeah.
said for it for sure.
And like accepting that reality is in many ways disconcerting because, I don't want the human race to become like we don't socialize and, we just want to do our own thing. And going to weddings, it's an important cultural thing. People enjoy that. I think again, at his level, it's probably a little bit different. At my level, it's like I have really no excuse. It really is like a true selfishness. I think he has more of a reason to be selfish. But I think if I don't go to them, then I start to disconnect myself from that social fabric. And I worry about that as well. So for me, I don't view it necessarily as a positive thing in the way he does. I view it almost as a negative thing because I do know that when I do get out of my
Yeah,
own world to attend those things, there is happiness that comes in
there you
as much
go.
as I don't want to admit to it
Yeah,
of being in that environment.
yeah,
But it's difficult for people like me who are generally more introverted to get the energy to like get dressed and show up and have to greet
make
people.
the
But
effort.
once you're
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
it's enjoyable for the most part. It was a realization that that is who I am, but that's not who I want to be.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and he does make that point, right? He also says, do what makes you happy. So you said it, right? Like even though, it takes effort and you tend to say no to most things, you realize in the end, going to an event like a wedding to you that will make you happy. So you'll tend to say yes to it. So yeah, I think ultimately is, what makes you happy, then you do that. Right. Cool. Well, I had a bunch of notes, so I'll rattle off a few. Some of them you've already mentioned, John. They resonated with me, right? He talked about being selfish. He talked about making the decision that not to want things. Again, talking about happiness, right? And a lot of people kind of, it's common to just want things, to feel like once you've achieved and you've been able to purchase things, that'll bring happiness. And he talks about deciding that not to want things. He also talked about, again, you mentioned this, John, about the journey, right? And he says, this was early in the podcast. He said, the journey is all there is. And that just couldn't be truer. He's like, that's all we have. We just have this moment right now. And then aligned to that, he talked again about happiness. He basically talked about how you can choose to be happy. Like, you don't need any external thing to be there, to exist for you to be happy. You can just choose to be happy and be happy. So again, just some stuff to think about. For me, who is someone who tends to be in my mind a lot, I ruminate a lot. He talked about that. He said, the mind will eat you alive if you let it. So when you talk about, John, like a work in progress, that's one for me, right? All of these are a work in progress for me, right? Happiness and choosing to be happy, despite things around us maybe not going our way or whatever it may be. He also talked about, you get out of life whatever is acceptable to you. So that's, again, just some real deep, deep things there to think about. And then this is towards the end, John's kind of funny, but he said a lot of life is not giving a shit. So a lot of the best things in life come from not giving a shit. And again, that's one that I think I've gotten better at. I was one that, would care deeply about things that I realize now I should have never cared. Like, why did I invest so much time and effort in all these things? And that's something and maybe it's just an age thing. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think that resonated with me big time, because I've, been going through that process over the last couple of years of just like letting go of a lot of things. Yeah. Tim, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think once you reach a level of success, a lot of these things become a lot easier. He even said that, it's definitely easier to live the life you want to live and do the things you want to do once you've reached a level of success and, have the financial ability to, do whatever you want to do anytime you want to do it. So, for me, it's like, I'm like, man, I just want to get there. Like the material things aren't that big of a deal to me. It's more, I just want to buy freedom and do the things I want to do and, not be tied down to whether it's a job or your business or whatever. Obviously, everyone, needs validation and needs work and things like that to be a productive member of society. But I want to be able to kind of choose those things and how much time I want to put into them and that type of thing. Hustle culture is it's tough to get away from because, you just, again, for me, it's once I reach that level where I can buy my time freedom, that's where I feel like, I'm going to find that true happiness and be able to take more trips with family and do things like that. And obviously, I've got some things going on in my life right now, which kind of really makes that resonate for me. But yeah, I think it's okay to hustle and work and do whatever to get to that level. And I think he kind of hints at that, but I think that's something that he may be a little bit detached from because he has had that level of success for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. He does talk about, and I think you both mentioned this, right? He talked about like what's next, and he talked about his next best or his next venture is building a school for young physicists. I thought that was interesting. And again, what he said about Elon, right, is his thing is invest as much as you can in yourself to build the next best thing.
One thing that was not something that Naval said, but it feels like a Navalism is this notion. I've always been keenly aware of this and observe how society is impacted by this. And this is the idea that humans are just incredible at adjusting to their new baselines. So you can take someone who's poor, hungry, they'll win the lottery and be instantly rich. And within the matter of months, that is now their new baseline. And it's almost like we're always trying to improve on a relative basis to achieve happiness. Even though that was a huge jump, you think, oh, they're happy for life now because they've gone from the lowest to the highest in terms of like all the money in the world that they'll never be able to spend, but it doesn't. They adjust that baseline within months, and then now they're seeking that next thing that's going to bring them happiness. If we don't sort of look internally and find things that bring us happiness that are not material or a feeling, a dopamine rush, we are forever trapped in this
Cycle. Yeah.
search of the next rush because we adjust that baseline immediately. So, Tim, you were saying, oh, I just want, to get to a point where I have freedom, and then you get that freedom, and then you adjust to that baseline of having the freedom, and then you're now looking for the next
What's the
thing.
next thing? Yeah. Well, they say, right, the finish line moves, right? Like your finish line keeps adjusting, keeps moving, and you're always chasing and chasing and chasing. I think we're all guilty of that.
And I'm all for having goals and moving the finish line. What I try to remember though is that that's not the happiness line. The happiness line I've already crossed if I convince myself of that, right? And you have to kind of convince yourself of it because it is your own mind, it is your own perspective. So you have to
Yes.
kind of convince yourself that the things you have, a functioning body, you have a functioning brain, you have had an incredible life with people that love you, that you have reached happiness. And everything else is really just a journey. And that's all it is. It's a way for you to maybe bring happiness to other people or to do for others. But if we tie happiness to reaching those things, I don't think we ever reach happiness because we're always thinking that that next thing is going
Correct.
to bring us happiness, and then we're still not there. Instead of looking at it as happiness line, it's just another challenge that we get to enjoy in life.
Yeah. Again, and back to the earlier comment, right? That resonated with me was he says, choose happiness. You can just decide. There are people that just decide to be happy. And to me, that's like, what? Really? Like that's unknown to me,
Liberating.
again, because you're chasing it and you think you have to chase it, you have to earn it. And then to your point, like I have to remind myself, like literally have to make the effort in my mind to say, wait, what about all these things you're grateful for? Like, look what you have, and to your point, John, like you look back in our lives, right? 20 years, 30 years from, ago, and you look to where we are now and you're like, gosh, that like I checked off all these boxes or even things that we didn't imagine we would have or get the opportunity to do. We've done it. And then we're totally just looking for the next thing.
Yeah. And on the practical side that I've avoided doing, after the last startup and I had a little more financial flexibility. I always wanted a certain car. There was cars that I wanted because like, oh man, when I make it, I'm gonna buy that car. And I made the deliberate choice to stick with my trusty Honda CRV, which is now at over 100,000 miles, as a way to kind of convince myself that look, I don't need those things to be happy. Like this car gets me where I want to be
Yes. Yes.
perfectly fine. And so I'm gonna drive that car until it no longer drives, and then I'll buy something new.
Yeah.
And I may
Yeah.
push off the buying the nice car even if I have the opportunity because again, maybe I don't want to chase things like that because it just kind of it just kind of opens that cycle again.
There's a lot to be said for that. And that's cool. I'm sure there's moments where that's not easy, right? I'm sure you get, like any man would, there's a moment where you think, oh, I should upgrade. Or you see a car drive by and you're like, man, that's a nice car. I'd look good in that. So I'm
Or when
sure it's
you're
not
watching
easy.
F1.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, that's a cool I would call it a challenge. You're challenging yourself, because you could easily go and upgrade a car. So good stuff. Good stuff. But if you haven't checked out the episode, definitely encourage you to go do so. Last I checked, the views on it are nearing 1 million in 7 days. He's up to 950,000 views, 1,200 comments. The episode's called 44 Harsh Truths About Human Nature, which when I read that, I didn't read it till after I listened to it, and I'm like, wow, he dropped 44 gems. So Chris Williamson's team must have kept track. So lots of gems on that one. Again, about 3.5 hours long, but worth it.
For sure.
Cool. I think that's the pod, guys. It's been good to be on. Thanks again for all the subscribers. Drop a like, leave a comment. We certainly want to hear from you. And by the way, you guys want to talk a little bit about Vibe Launch?
Sure. It's kind of a brand new thing that we're doing, just kind of starting out and feeling out. I think the idea is we're going to kind of go through and kind of talk about, vibe coding, the right ways to do things, the wrong ways to do things. We're going to have Johnny, who's, obviously doesn't need to vibe code, but, finds it useful in certain instances. He's going to give maybe some tutorials and kind of help people understand how to use it better. And yeah, just kind of try to create a community there where people can help each other out. Hopefully we can provide some value too. I think I'll be the test dummy on there, as far as I'm a new coder, and so he kind of uses me as his he gets to see what people are struggling with because I'm struggling with them. And so yeah, that's Johnny. You want to add anything else to that?
No, let's set it right.
So yeah, awesome.
Cool. We'll put the link in the comments so you guys can check out that channel. It's called Vibe Launch. And again, appreciate all of you, and we'll see you on the next episode.
All right, see you guys.
See you guys. Bye.